You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmond Construction, the law firm of Bose, McKinney, and Evans, and the Bose Public Affairs Group, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. You may find all your sales and rental equipment needs at McAllister.com. We are pleased to announce our podcast is now a member of the All Indiana Podcast Network. In partnership with Wish TV, you can find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle and me at leadersandlegends.net. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is Sarah Taylor, whom I am very, very pleased to say that I've known for quite a long time. She is joined today by Danielle Shockey, CEO, Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, as co-host. We're thrilled to have you, Sarah. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for asking me.
Well, I'm going to turn this over to Danielle, but before I do, when it comes back to me, just make sure you have an answer ready for how in the world did you get so lucky to land David Taylor?
Happy to.
Go ahead, Danielle.
Well, welcome, Sarah. And I have to say, fellow Girl Scout, I think that's fabulous that that's been a part of your story. And I certainly want to hear about that. And I know our listeners do as well. But there's a whole lot more to you than probably the Girl Scout background and a cookie that you may have sold. Although I hope it's, like I said, somehow led to your success. But before we get to that, so right now you're the executive director of the Hoosier Lottery. And I bet a lot of people don't really understand what is the construct of the Hoosier Lottery within the state, government, if you will. Is it an agency? Is it not? What is the mission of the Hoosier Lottery? Again, I think some of us know in part, but maybe just help our listeners understand what that means to be the executive director of the Hoosier Lottery.
All right. Well, I've been there 7 years now, and our mission is to maximize revenue to the state of Indiana in a socially responsible way. So we're tasked with using our products, selling our products, licensing retailers, investigating any concerns, and in the end, after marketing and distributing those products and selling them, returning those monies to the state of Indiana. But the first thing we do after selling the product is we pay the winners. So that's the biggest chunk of where our money goes. And then obviously a small amount to operations, but the bottom line really goes to the state of Indiana, and we contribute through the Indiana legislature prescribes where we put those monies. And there are 3 funds. Annually, we give $30 million to the local police and firefighter pension fund, $30 million to our local or our retired teachers fund, I should say. And lastly, the lottery surplus fund. And that was renamed not too long ago through the legislative process, formerly known as the Build Indiana Fund. But our money's in there primarily due the offset of the motor vehicle excise tax. So many Hoosiers remember maybe when they paid more, if you will, for their license plate. And now it is offset by those monies. There's also a little bit of technology money in there for schools and libraries.
Fabulous. Perfect. So being the executive director, you are responsible for all those things, but do you ever get to be a part of like the really fun winner stories? Like what I want to ask you is, what's your favorite, winner, if you will, that you've gotten to know their story?
Well, it is fun to be a part of the winning experience. And as I said in our mission, we want it done in a socially responsible way. And so we contribute heavily to the concept of positive play and encouraging our players to know their game, know their odds, set their limits, and stay within it. And that's important for us too. And we message heavily about playing responsibly, and we take it to heart. We really do. And we love those winning experiences. And so all around in 92 counties, there are folks that might just be winning a free ticket, quite honestly. They might be winning a smaller amount off a scratch off. And then there are those occasions where we have someone come in that has won multi-million dollars. And it is very exciting. But the great thing about Hoosiers and our winners are, quite honestly, Midwestern, practical, common sense. They know to likely consider seeking financial and legal advice when it gets to a certain number. You hear wonderful stories like, I was getting ready to get a used car. This allows me to think about, I might go ahead and get a new car. I'm going to add a deck on to my house. Now I'm talking the medium wins, if you will. The multi-million dollar wins. We've had a Powerball and a Mega both in the 3 digits millions while I have been there, and it's just very exciting. And they usually set themselves in an incorporated or some type of entity legally to make the claim. But we get to hear the stories behind the stories, and folks are so sincere. They want to help others. They want to help their families. They want to do right by their community. And like I said, just some of those wins that come in, whether it's 1,000 or more, they just come in and they want to just have a little bit of change. So we really champion their dreams, big and small, and we do it in what we believe is a very responsible way. So favorite winners. Some of my favorite memories, we're 31 years old, if you will, and we were launched in 1989. But in our 25th year, we brought back the infamous Hoosier Millionaire Show, and it aired for many years. And we anointed a lot of $1 million winners on that show over the years. And the hosts and hostess were well known. And those were some of my fondest memories. Is on the 25th anniversary, we took the road show out. We went around the state of Indiana, had some regional shows, had a final show at the state fair culminating in a win. And it was just awesome. People talked to me about that show. Now, it may be a memory that they sat and watched it with grandparents, because it's not been viewed for quite some time, but we just have great nostalgic memories of those. And like I said, for the current winners now, it's just, again, I'm just so pleased that they can find joy in doing something a little different, whether it's getting one additional bedroom on a house they were already building or thinking about purchasing, to just really smart decisions, not that we judge, but it's awesome.
Well, I appreciate what you said about Midwest. I would think that probably has a lot to do with it. What about, so does it sell itself, or is there a huge amount of strategy that goes into remaining relevant? How does that work in something that it appears to be fairly successful? Obviously, you very good work for our state. But yeah, how does that work for you?
So the core products really are draw games and scratch off games. And it's a product portfolio. And so there is brand management and there's management of that portfolio. And we have professionals that do it for us. And we also have subcontracts and others. So it's a huge team effort, involves lots of folks. And there is an annual business plan and a strategy to it all. And you do need to remain relevant and engaged. So the products, in some cases, change themselves over time. You change a prize structure or a matrix to a draw game. The types of scratch-off tickets you bring, we have folks that just on occasion might stop in while they're getting gas, buy a $1 ticket. And then we have folks that enjoy games with different payouts and prize structures. We also have a $3 ticket area where prize structure where it's a little bit they enjoy maybe a bingo game or a crossword. It takes a little bit longer time for them to have that enjoyment or entertainment. And so we have products that fit into that $3 price range. And so just over time, you get to know your players. We do market research, as you can imagine, and focus groups, and work with the advertising agency and the media buyers. We have a long-term arrangement with IGT Indiana that we sourced sales, marketing, and distribution of the product to. So they really are combing through what's best practices and what's going on in the industry overall, and bring a lot of sophistication to those decisions based on data and sales. And so it's a business, quite honestly. It's a quasi-agency, to kind of reflect back on an earlier question you asked for us. So a separate body politic corporate to kind of legalize it, if you will. But we have a lot of things that we beat to the same beat that other state agencies do. The difference is we're tasked with making money. And like I said, in a socially responsible way.
How is, so I'm old enough and I grew up in Indianapolis. I remember when the lottery started and we had the first scratch off at the gas station on the corner. And in my memory, and I'm asking, is this a myth or not? I recall that it seemed like everybody was winning, like $1 or a free ticket. And that was in my, again, I'm not gonna say how old I was then, but I remember thinking, that's brilliant, right? You're going to keep us coming back for more. Is that a myth, or is it similar to the things they say about Vegas and the slots machines, right? You need to keep a certain formulaic component in the winning strategy. Does that myth or not?
Well, we are a game of chance, and we have odds and rules listed on our website. There's information on the back of every ticket. We have a hotline. We encourage folks to familiarize themselves with all those tools. We also have a free mobile app. And we're a game of chance. And like I said, we set those odds. We ask you to know that. So a $1 ticket has a certain type of payout, if you will. And a higher price ticket will have a higher payout, if you will. And so that's kind of the strategy behind it, how the ticket itself works in the product portfolio. We do know that we have core players. We have folks that enjoy playing our big national draw games, Powerball and Mega Millions. Those are drawn twice weekly currently. And so they think, oh, when I'm out, I'm going to go ahead and get a ticket for tonight's draw or for this week's drawings. And they might be very regular in it. Matter of fact, we have people tell us they play their parents' numbers, or they play the birth dates or their favorite numbers. We also have lots of folks that say, I'm not as familiar with it, but right now, while jackpots are rolling and it kind of has captured some national media interest, how do I go about doing it? And they choose to do a quick pick, which just allows them to have the computer, if you will, the random number generator, generate their numbers for that upcoming draw. And then we have on the scratch side, like I said, folks that engage just on occasion when they're in and they happen to see something. We do on occasion have what are tickets that, for example, we've had a Ghostbusters ticket. You hear about tickets like Wheel of Fortune and other things that tie to bigger, maybe it's a second chance opportunity. Maybe they're going to Las Vegas if they win a trip. And so there's experiences, and that kind of ties back to relevance. But I would simply say this on the ticket and your reflection back to when they first came out. It just depends on the tickets and the design, the price point, and the payout on those winning experiences.
Like I said, it's a long time ago memory, and it was my feeling at that time, and it might have just been my one gas station and the few, so hope that wasn't too much of a question.
No.
So Robert, did you want to chime in there with something? You're laughing at me.
No, I wanted to ask Sarah very quickly and then go back to you, Danielle. Sarah, have you ever been in line at the grocery store or the convenience store or the gas station, and you're in a hurry and there's somebody in front of you buying $200 worth of lottery tickets, and you're like, well, do I get mad or say, thank you very much for your support?
When it is, when we call it kind of that water cooler treatment or national media exposure, when a jackpot's rolling and they start talking about it in their daily show, and we get the earned media, that's the time that I'll stop by our retailers. Pandemic has obviously enforce social distancing, and rightfully so, and people standing in lines and being careful. But it is fun to stop by, make sure the retailers are doing okay and how the players are doing. And often I'm not behind in the line, hopefully. And yeah, that's fun.
I bet it drives your husband crazy, knowing how impatient he is. Danielle, may I ask one more question? And then back to you.
Yeah.
Are people who work for the lottery? I have actually never played the lottery, Sarah. Very sorry. Forgive me. You're not getting any of my money. I have bought Girl Scout cookies, though. Do people who are you prohibited from playing the lottery if you work for the lottery?
We are. In Indiana, we have state law that prohibits us and our family, our household members, if you will, from playing the lottery. When we're out of state, I know that I can look at a scratch off ticket, and if it's not somehow tied to one that we're doing here where there's maybe a second chance prize out in Vegas or something like that, I could do it. I did not play the lottery before arriving here. I had bought maybe one Powerball ticket for my now deceased mother-in-law, but at the time she enjoyed the lottery. But I enjoy, people are attracted to them for different reasons. Like I said, the extended play of a bingo or a crossword, or they like it because it had a brand on there like Ghostbusters. And the problem is I buy them sometimes when I cross state lines, but then I never scratch them. I just enjoy the art. And since I'm in the industry.
Go ahead, Danielle. Sorry.
No, that was a good question. Actually, I love your question about standing in line. Yes, sometimes that certainly does happen to all of us out there. Sarah, tell us a little bit about, so I think there's a couple, what I'm going to say trends, but online gaming, betting, sports betting that, is new to us in Indiana, new to Hoosiers, relatively new. Has that impacted the Hoosier Lottery and your revenue?
Well, we obviously watch closely what goes on with other light entertainment type opportunities. And we have had some good results these prior years and look forward to having another good year when we close our books at the end of this year. And so you're always mindful of other choices that folks have to make, and you watch that in an industry. Overall, in the lottery industry, some states' lotteries have different obligations than ours, in the sense of a small number of them have been tasked with sports wagering, for example. Not many, but a few. And so you learn indirectly about it. But quite honestly, we stay in our lane, and our lane is selling scratch off and draw games at our 4,400 retailers across the state of Indiana. And we do keep an eye on trends in our industry and in the gaming industry as a whole, just so we're aware.
And is there a trend? Is the online betting indicative of an online trend that somehow could translate into anything with the games of chance, the Hoosier Lottery, that you would look at to the future or are looking at? Is that a model?
Well, our annual business plan puts forth in these past couple of plans, especially about future innovation, just the idea that we do keep an eye on what's going on. I will say, as I think every industry that I'm aware of, this pandemic has had all of us reflect on consumer behavior. We work with many retailers that do buy online, pick up in store of other products beyond ours, not ours. And so there are lots of trends in the marketplace that we're keeping a close eye on.
That's actually, I hadn't thought of that. Can you, in the COVID environment, has there been allowability for the delivery of a lottery ticket with my groceries if in fact the retailer does sell lottery tickets?
We do not currently have that process here in the state of Indiana, just meaning that hasn't been worked out with any retailer by any means. I think there's so many that are busy with just trying to rethink whether they're doing delivery or that buy online, pick up in store for traditional products, that some of the other, if you will, age-gated products and other things were 18 and older, as you may know, in our situation. So I think that they've got a lot on the menu to deal with first.
Well, we have delivery of lots of things that are age-gated. That's a new word I didn't know, age-gated. So I guess it's possible, right? That there could be a delivery system with lottery.
Well, one day, you never know. Our bread and butter, if you will, really are the retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to do a pitch for Girl Scouts right now. So Grubhub is a national partner. So to your point about COVID, you have to look at the way you do things. We would have never thought 18 months ago that you'd be able to order your Girl Scout cookies through Grubhub and get them contactless, free to your house without a delivery fee. So I mean, everything changes. So again, I didn't think it was possible there either.
Yeah, it changed rapidly these past few months, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. How about, so again, a cookie analogy, our bakers are looking at the sale of comfort foods and telling us, right, that the trends in the market are that in the pandemic, that's up by like 27%, the purchase of pastries and cookies. Hopefully it translates to Girl Scout cookies. My question for you is, are there similar trends it's been hard, leisure activities? I mean, I hadn't built a puzzle in my lifetime until 2020. Is there similar trends in lottery that people were using it as something to fill a gap?
I definitely think that there are folks that have not been able to do other light entertainment, like we said, fun activities that they normally might enjoy. I'm sure some people's travel schedules changed and other choices they've made. And so we have, if you will, seen an increase in sales in our scratch-off products, especially in most recent months, not in the beginning, obviously, of the pandemic, but we were growing that scratch-off ticket portfolio to be a great majority of our sales. You have a little bit less control, if you will, when you belong to a national jackpot game like Powerball and Mega Millions to make an individual decision there. Really, you're making that collectively with other lotteries that participate in that game. And so you're dependent more or less on when those games roll over time and get to a larger number for what we would call folks that don't normally play or light or lapse. Maybe they just haven't been out or have chosen not to make a purchase. And so right now, just during this recording, we happen to be in a time when we've got a couple of those games that are rolling at a higher number. And so we're now seeing some increase to the jackpot games. And like other things, sometimes when you're in thinking about one thing, you think about something else. And so currently, we would say we're in a pretty decent financial position where we are in this current fiscal year.
How important is the artwork of the scratch off to the purchase? I mean, can you tell, like, actually, maybe my question is, what's the most popular scratch off right now? Do you know that?
Well, it's kind of that old expression maybe a grandparent would use, but you shop with your pocketbook, or, I'm going to use that expression. So it's like any consumer product. I mean, we know from the marketplace whether something appeals or not. We put out tickets. We'd like to think they're all going to be winners, if you will, in our eyes. We like them for their artwork. We love the color. We love the schematic. We love how it's set up. We think it'll be attractive. And on occasion, it is not. And it is not out there as long as some of the others. We have a product line, if you will, kind of in the $10 price point called Indiana Cash Blowout. That's one example I'll give. And sometimes when prizes, not everyone is looking for a huge top prize, believe it or not. They just enjoy smaller winning experiences. And that opportunity at winning an amount and getting, perhaps they choose to buy another ticket and get another small amount, perhaps after some win, they enjoy that. And so we, not only is it the look of the ticket, or like I talked about the extended play where someone might enjoy that longer time to solve the puzzle, if you will, sort of uncover the boxes. They also enjoy the winning experiences. So some folks think, oh, if I happen to win, let's say $50 on that $10 ticket, great. At some point, I might enjoy another one. It may be a non-winner, quite honestly. So what we do have on our $1 and $2 price points, especially for folks that are new to playing a lottery scratch off, we have a second chance opportunity where if it's a non-winner, they can go and for free sign up at our My Lottery from our website. And My Lottery is like a loyalty club. And it's really just meant for them to enter the tickets into a second chance drawing that we do once a month. And they might win a smaller prize off a non-winning ticket. And that's pretty exciting. We also, around August, had a chance on non-winning Powerball draw tickets to put in for a while. And we drew from there for folks to win a chance at being a Powerball winner for our New Year's Eve experience on Dick Clark's ABC Rockin' New Year's Eve. And we ended up with a finalist from Indiana, and they were one of 5 that appeared on the show. And unfortunately, our person did not make it across the finish line for the $1 million first prize of the new year. Person out of DC won, but we were excited to have a finalist out of Seymour, Indiana.
That is fun. The second chances are a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah.
So going out on a limb, when you were a little girl, you probably didn't say, I want to be the executive director of a lottery. So how did you get to this role? And I know, obviously I looked at your career path, and it's been very, I would say, customer oriented, customer care and the customers have changed. Yep. Is that still a big part of your world? It sounds like it is with the mission, but kind of how did you step through to the Hoosier Lottery executive director role?
So I've had family members that were always expressing an interest in political issues, government issues. So that probably came with the territory as I was being raised in a smaller city here in Indianapolis. And they were active. I enjoyed being active in numerous groups, including Brownies and Girl Scouts, also 10-year 4-H member and other organizations that the high school had. Maybe in a smaller situation like I was raised in, you had an opportunity to do a lot of things, sports and band and clubs and organizations, and you could still fit it all in your schedule. To this day, I look back and now kind of wonder, especially after having my kids too, and knowing there's so many more choices nowadays too, and the intensity of some of them and their focus obviously being a lot. But I enjoyed all those organizations. And then after I knew that in college I was going to study more or less public service, an IU grad from the School of Public Environmental Affairs, and have enjoyed a focus on public service, which you're right, includes a lot related to operations and customer service, where kind of that parlays itself into citizen engagement, parlays itself into player engagement. And the best part of being at the Hoosier Lottery really is working with winners and our beneficiaries. It's so nice to know that retired teachers, retired firefighters, and policemen, if you will, are part of the Hoosier Lottery family in our mind. We feel a close connection to them. And so that's kind of one contact and government opportunity led itself to another for the most part.
Well, thank you for all of your service and all of the roles you've had, which seems like a great way to bring Robert back in a little bit, because you and he know each other through some government service. Is that not right, Robert?
Yes. And it was a thrill to work with Sarah. Let me thank the sponsors very quickly before we move on. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmond Construction, the law firm of Bose, McKinney, and Evans, and the Bose Public Affairs Group, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Sarah Taylor knew P.E. McAllister very, very well. Sarah, is there a particular Hoosier leader or legend you especially admire?
Well, when I was Marion County Clerk, everyone was kind enough to take me under their wing. But I do think back to my opportunity to meet Judge Sarah Evans Barker. And I feel like she was someone, whether she would know it or not, had obviously made a great impression upon me. And I've always enjoyed watching her career and her approach to things. And so I feel like I learned from her. There are so many of those that have helped me in the political and government side, if you will, because I really find that what I enjoy is that servant side, the public service side of this. So there were many folks that I got to know in those early days that always helped me make connections that just led from one thing to another. I know that you and I served Mayor Greg Ballard together, and I have great memories there. I have great memories of the county elected officials I served with, and have just great respect for so many in this service. I know sometimes on occasion there's a disappointment with a public servant, but I feel like day in, day out, it isn't not only the leaders but the team members that we've had over the years in those various government jobs I've worked in. And it's tough at times, but I've just met some great people.
Let me get your impressions on one person I know you think the world of. Judge Sarah Evans Barker was a podcast guest of Danielle and I's. We had a terrific conversation with her. But let me mention another podcast guest we interviewed, and give me some thoughts about her, because she's recently retired from public service for now, perhaps, and that's Susan Brooks.
Oh my gosh. They're sad, obviously, to hear when she was ready to make that decision to leave her role. But I think back to her too in some of those earliest days when I was getting my feet wet here locally. And again, someone that just naturally gains your respect the moment they start talking, same as the judge. And what a sharp person, how talented both those ladies are. Susan, just what a great representative she's been for Indiana. Another rock star. I can't say enough great things about Susan.
Absolutely. It's a little bit of a leap for those of us who become enamored with politics at a young age. We sometimes joke and have conversations with people. What's the first thing you can remember? I can remember Watergate summer 73. That's kind of like the earliest event I can remember. And well, perhaps Nixon isn't the best springboard to public service or interest in politics, even though I'm a big fan. That's something that you kind of nurture as you grow older. But the leap from being interested in politics to being involved in politics to putting your name on the ballot is Canyon-esque. What made you, or who helped you, decide to put your name on the ballot? I believe 1994 is when you were elected Marion County Clerk. It was a great year for Republicans. Mm-hmm. Also saw the election of Scott Newman as prosecutor and a huge upset over Jeff Modisette. But there had to be some real soul searching and a little bit of hesitation, along with the belief that this is an opportunity for you. What was that thought process, and who kind of said, come on, Sarah, do it?
So I definitely have early, political memories, but one honestly that probably resonated because of the age and time was just, Ronald Reagan's election as president. So I kind of remember that point in time, and then going off to school and studying about public affairs, and like I said, at SPIA. My plan was to always hopefully work behind the scenes in government, making a difference. And I could at times help on the campaign side where needed. And I also enjoyed, obviously, true public service. And so was a little surprised when I was approached by a few folks that I had supported or they had worked with me in campaigns to have an interest. I remember going home to David and just my husband saying, I've kind of been asked if I've had an interest in running. And I was like, I had never thought of myself in that way. I had always been someone behind the person that had the elected official role, supporting them either in a campaign way or in a public service way. And my husband's like, haven't you been preparing for this all your life? Now, again, my life was still pretty short now. Definitely that's been a while. And it
Were you
caught
at
me
the
off
sheriff's
guard.
department? Let me ask you, forgive me for interrupting.
Yes,
I'm very sorry. Were you at the sheriff's department
yes,
working there when you decided to run for clerk? I
yes,
thought so. McAtee was sheriff, but
yes,
Cotty was the Republican nominee that year
yes,
for sheriff. So there was some continuity in county
yes.
government for you.
Yes, and so I thought, oh, I might take a leave of absence and help with the sheriff's race in some way, or just continue with public service. And so when it was considered whether I'd like to run with some of the other county wides to be considered, like I said, no, it was a shock to me. I was so surprised that David recognized that maybe it was a good fit. And so I just quickly sought out some counsel. And, there were the Rex Earlys of the world and Russ Brown and Jack Cotty and others that were active at the time. And John Sweezy was chairman and others. And the current office holder at the time was Faye Mallory. And so pretty exciting. Mayor Goldsmith and others were, obviously heavily involved in the Indianapolis scene, and various folks were kind enough to talk to me and or be folks that I looked to for advice, or just even the knowledge that they served, and could I also be a part of it.
Let me bring up the name of a previous podcast guest as well, who if memory serves, was instrumental in your kind of political strategy and approach and logistics, and that is the wonderful, amazing Lisa Dietrich.
Oh my gosh. There's so many names I hate to say because I'm going to leave people off, but Lisa is core too. Lisa, right away, she actually had known my mother a little bit through relationships with Mayor Hudnut, if you will. And so you come to town after college, you're trying to figure out where you're going to go, and you meet with various people. And Lisa was one of those, kind enough to take some time with me, and then just jump on board immediately. Anytime I express an interest in something, she chaired my campaign committee, and I'm just very grateful. Again, someone that works great wonders behind the scenes. I've learned so much from her, and she's a rock star too.
It's amazing how many Republican campaigns she either ran or contributed mightily to while she was working for Ed Tracy.
And they got along great.
They sure did. The Marion County clerk has more duties than I can remember. When Doris Ann Sadler won the election as clerk in 2002 to succeed you, she hired me to run the elections, to be the election administrator, which I did for 5 elections. But the one thing that struck me, I came from the state house working for a state office holder, but coming to the county and being involved in the elections, there is no office and no task that requires you to be bipartisan more than running the elections. How did you navigate that? And how much did that kind of help frame who you are as a public official? Because you have, just real quick, because you have a terrific reputation as working kind of like Murray Clark does and Toby McClamrock and others, and Doris Ann, quite frankly, of folks who can reach across the aisle, come up with something smart, and then get it done.
Well, thank you for that observation. And you're right, that county clerks are so core for those main duties, supporting the court, the collection of child support, and running the elections, and numerous other responsibilities, but obviously the ones that hit the high points there. And running elections at that point is not about politics. I mean, I know that we're putting on an election that's going to make a difference, but it is about getting it done and surrounding yourself with the right people. And luckily, Marion County had a lot of folks with a lot of years of experience. Nothing ever goes perfectly, as we like to say. Poll workers are ill the morning of the election, or a machine doesn't work correctly, and these things happen. But how you manage those concerns and issues, and promptly and correctly, is important. And so I knew that it took everyone to make it happen. And so it was important to forge those relationships. And Kathleen Mullen was at the Board of Voter Registration and the Democratic member to that. And she just wanted to roll up the sleeves and get it done with us. And we worked well together with her and so many others just to make it happen. Because at that point, there were over 900 precincts. less voting locations, but still you're running that many situations, and it's massive and a huge responsibility. It takes a lot of time and execution, as you know. I'm preaching to the choir there. But it was important to have those relationships, and people just stepped up to help on all sides.
Katie Mullen, what a complete and total sweetheart. For those of you who didn't know her, she's Ann Mullen O'Connor's mother, and Dan Parker and Mike O'Connor's mother-in-law. As hardcore a Democrat as you'll ever meet. She's sweet as pie. And I asked her one time, I'm like, you ever vote for Republican? And she just looked at me like I had asked her if she had robbed a bank. And I'm like, you wouldn't have voted for Lincoln? And she looked at me and she goes, never. I loved it. How great is that?
I learned an awful lot from her.
Did your time as clerk intercede with, or intersect with, the Florida debacle in 2000?
Yes. I have some hanging chads here. I was given a baggie.
Oh, you were?
I'm serious.
So how did you, as clerk, because I want to ask you to please articulate that into the Help America Vote Act, and there's no system of voting is perfect, as you just said earlier. You couldn't hack the lever machines, but they also weren't exactly the most reliable. So you kind of give and you get. What were your impressions of what happened in Florida as an elected official who is charged with seeing that? Because I just remember when I took the gig, and then I look at other people who have issues throughout the country, I just feel badly for them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I said we were all in an association together, and later, as they're disposing of things, there's some of that stuff they sweep off the floor, and they seriously put them in clear little Ziplocs, and everybody got a little piece of that. And you watch it a little bit from afar, kind of holding your breath. I mean, we hold our breath while we certify the elections. When I was in those clerk's days, as you recall, those are responsible, because you're waiting to certify and then find out who's going to ask for a recount. And you want, when they reflect on all those records, you want voters and everyone to know that it was done with integrity and accuracy, as much as a human and technological component plays in there together. And I watched 2000 unfold, kind of not a front row seat by any means, but an inside knowledge on how things work. Each state obviously has its own election laws, but things work mostly in similar ways. And so it was scary, and our industry clearly knew that at that point the federal government, through through our legislative representatives to Congress, were likely to make changes. And the Help America Vote Act came out and put a lot of changes in place where it came to, especially election equipment was at the heart of that matter. And we had to work through that locally. And then a Help America Vote Act plan, if you will, had to be submitted here from the state to the feds and seek approval and funding. And from there, all those changes unfolded in statewide voter registration and in election equipment.
One of the other functions of the Marion County clerk is to marry people. Beth White famously performed the first same-sex marriage in Marion County after the Supreme Court Supreme Court decision. But you performed several ceremonies in your 8 years as clerk. But the first ceremony you performed, the first couple you married, was me and my first wife. And I remember meeting you and you saying, I have never done this before, so please be patient. And my response was, neither have I. Now, I've subsequently added to that total. But do you, I wouldn't expect you remember performing that ceremony for she and I, but do you remember some of the folks you married and how fun it was? Because, a lot of people get all dressed up. They put their wedding gown on. It's a big deal to be in the city-county building.
I do actually think maybe I remember that, quite honestly. And I do, it was something Faye had done. So it's at some point you kind of like, what's going on? Like, what these people are showing up, and they're showing up to the, if you will, our city-county building, our courthouse, and they're looking for, is it a judge in other old-fashioned terms, or not old-fashioned terms, but terms in other places, justice of the peace. They're just trying to find an avenue that is a public, choice. And so at first I was a little hesitant, it's so personal. And I was a little concerned. So I will tell you, I did it for a while, and then I have to tell you, I kind of had to let go emotionally. But there were some fun people I met, and it was just their choice and the timing. I think of folks that even just some of the military folks that we registered to vote before they were deployed, or maybe marriages in those circumstances. And so, I do have fond memories. There are one or two that said, I know we've done it here in the office, but my family's coming over Saturday. Would you come out and redo it, if you will, in an unofficial way, but to our family, they'll feel like they're a part of it. And I met a couple of great couples, especially later in life, folks that were widowed and seeking another relationship. And I got to meet their families. I can name 2 or 3 still. And so I do have some fond memories. But I definitely, probably that was not my forte. After a bit of time, I was carrying over what had been done before me. And I kind of thought, I'm going to shift directions.
One other thing I want to ask you about, because I remember where I was, and we've talked about it before with other guests on the Leaders and Legends podcast. You were elected clerk in 94. You were reelected in 98, which were still kind of the getting to the tail end, but still the halcyon days of the Marion County Republican Party, built by Bullen and sustained by Lugar and Sweezy and Hudnut and Goldsmith, and the list goes on and on. But in 2007, Mayor Greg Ballard became mayor in his upset of Bart Peterson. Greg Ballard has talked about that night with us. Quite frankly, Bart Peterson talked about that election with us. I was working at Channel 8 with Susan Williams and Toby McClamrock and Jim Shella, and simply couldn't believe what I was seeing. What were your impressions? I mean, you knew the county very well. You had faced the voters. Maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe like a lot of us, you just figured that Peterson was going to be mayor for as long as he wanted, and then the Democrats would just run this county, for a generation. But this retired Marine came in and upset the cart. What were your thoughts just on that night and that election?
Well, definitely, lots of folks express an interest in serving and have good intentions, and sometimes just can't get across the finish line based on politics or maybe an issue crops up. And so that was an election that I wasn't as dialed in on as I was so many others over the years. And so I was surprised that he pulled it off, quite frankly. I do recall, though, the sentiment of the law enforcement community. And I watched that a bit, their concerns. But with all due respect, and I've been married to one and have had other family members, I do believe they're a large advocate group, if you're a stakeholder group. And sometimes that voice is really loud, and sometimes it ebbs and flows like other advocacy groups. And they're a huge stakeholder and do such an important role in our community. And they had concerns, as I recall. And so that was maybe where I was a little bit less surprised, because the momentum there seemed like would you ever monitor that in the future, as a litmus test?
I had just left from being communications director at the Indiana Republican Party, was working for a company called Shield Sexton. I'd been there 7 days when Ballard won. I left Shield to be Ballard's press secretary, communications person for the transition. And I remember them talking about you, and you ended up taking a role in the Ballard administration, head of constituent services. Did you ever think you would work for an Indianapolis mayor? And what was it like working for Greg Ballard?
No, I did not necessarily think I'd be on the city side of services. I was always on the county side of services. Also wondered whether I'd ever end up at the state or not. The state is, a large operation. And so I wasn't sure, Marion County being our largest county. And obviously, when I was around my clerk friends, they would say, oh my gosh, that's so many precincts or whatever. And I would say, no, or so many courts. And registered voters. And I'd say, really, we do the same things. It's just based on size. And so we just do it a little bit more for that many more precincts. It's really very relevant. The issues are the same, regardless of size in the case of performing those statutory duties or constitutional duties too. So I did not think that I would be on the city side. I always admired many of our mayors and would have helped if asked, but I just didn't see it. So when I received a call from the transition team, I think they were a little unsure about what exactly a role might be, but would I at least talk about it? And I remember saying, so tell me a little bit about the military side of him, since it's a huge part of his life and his way of operating. I don't know if my way would gel, quite honestly, with the guardrails that might come with that directness. And they're like, no, you'll find that he's, very approachable. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised, to be honest. And so I said, well, I'll think about it. And I received a couple of calls from pretty important folks just saying, please think about it. And so I remember coming in for a quick visit and still not 100% knowing exactly the fullness of the role. And then pretty much there's going to be a news conference and here's exactly the title of the role and what you're doing. And then they hand you a mic and say, well, what do you think about this? And I went, oh, I didn't know that was on the list of duties, but okay. I will say, I honestly thought someone would hand me a playbook when I got there. And I remember putting in my car snow boots and equipment and things, not knowing what we would be called out to do as cabinet members for the city in that winter. And Robert, I also remember you and I being around one day when unfortunately a tornado, I think something was being sighted on the west side, and a decision related to, should we evacuate? Should we distribute folks down to lower floors? And I think you and I were there as cabinet members having a chat with the emergency management and the public safety team on where's the playbook on it exactly. And even though you go through numerous drills and big buildings like that, and we had a team that was, equipped, you just, that was a pretty concerning day. Fortunately, everything worked out just fine.
Nobody could have predicted what a terrific mayor Greg Ballard turned out to be. I thought he was going to get clocked by Peterson. His first year was pretty rocky, but it's fair to say that Greg Ballard left the 25th floor where the mayor's office is to almost you have to be pretty hardcore partisan not to think that Greg Ballard did a terrific job. As someone who was an elected official for 8 years, what do you think of Greg Ballard's performance as mayor?
I learned so much from Greg Ballard that I wish I'd known it before I was county clerk. His discipline and commitment to service, to performance would have been so helpful. And I, to this day, use it. I'm currently in a public manager course at Ball State to get my certification in public management. And we are currently studying performance measure. In our most recent course, we discussed City Stat out of Baltimore and Atlanta's efforts also on dashboards for performance. He created that IndyStat program with Michael Huber and everyone taking the lead on that. But I learned so much from him on performance management, on servant leadership and service. And so when Governor Pence was kind enough to have his team outreach about some opportunities at the state, those just really set you up well for being helpful to another administration in a different role, because Six Sigma, process improvement, the engagement of partners outside of the public realm, at corporations and others to help us. I can cite numerous things that he did that were just unbelievable. And his hands-on approach, Winnie and Mayor Ballard are everywhere. And that was awesome. He was always, always on the floor, if not out and about, and always could pop in your office or ask you a question. And got a couple of funny stories there where he has certain rules about PowerPoints, if you will, the military coming out in him, I think, and his leadership rules. And, I once gave him a really big pitch to make a major change at the Mayor's Action Center, which rolled up to constituent services that I was the director of. And at the end, it was kind of like, you could have done it in 3 slides or 6 slides. I had like 40 teed up because I wanted to really make that pitch. So I have great memories and respect for him.
Last question before I turn it over to Danielle for her final segment. And Danielle's going to ask you the 5 questions. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Susan Brooks. You ready?
Yes.
What's it like being married to a dreamboat named David?
Well,
I love your husband. You have terrific kids. It's a wonderful marriage. I think the world of him. How important has that been in just their patience and understanding well, I don't know about patience, but the understanding of what you do for a living and the public demands of the jobs you've had?
So opposites attract, for sure, in our case. Well, we've been married 30 years, fall of 21, so this fall. And I am sure he questions it on most days, but he's been a great partner. And like I said, he really was supportive when I came home about the clerk's idea, because I just thought it was strangest question I'd received, no way. So he's been very supportive. He's been very patient. He's taken on a lot of duties. These roles that we take on, obviously, take a lot of time. And one of my favorite memories, and Robert, you'll appreciate this, when the documentary was being done about the elections in Marion County and how large the precinct is that I was in before it was divided, and David's role there as an inspector. So we went to see the show that night, and a lot of film of Doris Ann and you all running the elections. And he came out of there and said, I had no idea what you did for 8 years. And that was just the election hat. And even though he had been an inspector or a committee person, he knew some of the, that work. But honestly, he walked away and just was, I think, respectful and amazed.
Danielle?
All right. Sarah, the same 5 questions for all of our guests. What was your first job?
Well, babysitting, but I would say that I pushed grocery carts at Marsh in Greencastle, Indiana. And I also, in those days, they had glass bottles for Coke products and soft drink products, and those were to be returned. And so we had a responsibility for returning those bottles, and we would go out in the parking lot and get the carts. And that was not when there was any equipment to help you bring the carts in. And we also sacked groceries. So my official title was probably sacker. And we sacked groceries, dealt with returned glass bottles for soft drinks, and pushed carts.
Okay, perfect. How about your first concert?
Oh, gosh. Billy Joel was one of them. I found a couple of tickets the other night. I should have probably had those out handy. I have them in a little bit of a scrapbook now. But I saw Billy Joel at DePaul. I went to Purdue a couple of times for concerts from Greencastle, and definitely over to the State Fair for a couple. But I'm going to go with pretty close to Billy Joel.
Probably not a bad place to start, actually. How about a book you would recommend? What's a book you love that you think others should read?
Oh, well, I'm a mystery reader. As a child, was a Nancy Drew fan. And I'm reading quite a bit right now with this course with Ball State. So First Break All the Rules is one that kind of comes to mind. I saw a teaser the other day on Book TV about Conscious Leader, the Whole Foods gentleman, and your purpose on why you do what you do and doing it conscientiously to many purposes. So I might pick that one up. So I don't think I'm gonna give a recommendation. I'll just kind of let you know what I've been reading, if that's okay.
Well, and that's kind of a teaser. We should all go check out that To Come book. What about, is there a moment in history, Sarah, that if you could be there in person and witness it while it happened, what event would you have chosen?
Oh. I'm glad no one told me of this ahead of time, or maybe I should be upset. I purposely chose not to listen or know, just so we're fair about this.
No, we like the thought process. We like to hear the guests turn it over in their mind because there's so many great options, hopefully, for all these questions.
I'm a big reader of historical fiction. I would go to London, and I would go before or at the beginning of the women's suffrage movement.
Very fitting as we just wrapped up the 100th anniversary.
Yes, enjoyed that celebration. Enjoyed also seeing a bit of it over in London when I had a chance.
All right, last one. If you could have dinner 2 hours uninterrupted with someone living today, who would you choose?
I think I'd choose Governor Holcomb.
Speaking of a history nut.
And Lincoln.
Yeah,
so I would love to see his collection.
Of the presidential signatures?
Of the presidential signatures, and I would love to spend that time with him.
Well, maybe he's a listener, and maybe from that, you will get a lunch invitation. Because, Robert, I don't think anybody's ever said Governor Holcomb yet, have they?
Nobody said Governor Holcomb yet, but I'm an unabashed fan. He's a terrific person. He's a veteran. He's a history nut. And quite frankly, I think he's doing the best you can absolutely do given the current turmoil.
I really enjoy working for him. And I enjoyed my service, obviously, to Governor Pence and to Mayor Ballard and all those before.
What about when you and I both worked for David Wu? Did you enjoy that service?
Thank goodness Marion County had David Wu. I remember sitting on a difficult election day where for just a moment the truck hadn't returned with the supplies, and David finally felt like, it's taking a little bit longer than it should. He better call me. And I remember going outside here on a step and almost having a moment of a tear, like, oh boy, this is not going to be good. And luckily, a short time later, it was on its way. It just had one little stop that they shouldn't have stopped for. And I don't even recall the stop, but it's just they're supposed to come directly. I'm sure someone had to go to the bathroom or get a drink, but still, it's important you return timely with those. And so I remember David Wu calling. It's a fun memory.
You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmond Construction, the law firm of Bose, McKinney, and Evans, and the Bose Public Affairs Group, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Our guest today has been former Marion County Clerk, former top official in the Ballard administration, Sarah Taylor. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on. Danielle, as always, thank you for co-hosting. Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.